Good morning, my friends. The friend here, and today we're talking about Tassadar in yet another of my Overexplained Talents videos. Tassadar is a long-range artillery mage. He deals massive amounts of damage. He is specialized in providing unique forms of crowd control to his team, and he's able to amplify his team damage. Tassadar is kind of weak to dives, engages, people that can very easily zone him out because he needs support from his team. And not only that, he has lots of mechanics in his arsenal that force him to stand still, which makes him very subpar. Because not only does he have all skill shots, he also needs to keep himself standing still. So he's very vulnerable to like Tracer, Bonda's jumping in, Anubarak. Anybody that can go in quickly is a problem for Tassadar. Still though, Tassadar is very gratifying, he's satisfying, he's amazing to play, he's very fun, and he deals lots of damage. And because of that, he has my utmost respect. And not only that, he's an OG Protoss in the lore. Nothing but the highest forms of respect for him. Talk about his abilities now. Trait. Tassadar has a unique auto attack. It's not like other types of heroes. He has a beam. You right click an enemy, you have the beam on them, it slows them by 15% so long as it's on them. Pretty nice. If you're trying to kill somebody, slowing somebody by 15% for your team to capitalize on that is very important. Not only that, but as you're attacking, you're building up charge. And your damage and mana regeneration get increased by this charge up until 100%. When you hit 100%, you also generate an additional 3 mana every second, on top of that 100% bonus mana regeneration. Resonance Beam basically tells Tassadar, hey, you want to be in the fight for a while, you want to be using your auto attacks, and when you do, you get rewarded with additional mana. And this is very important because Tassadar's other abilities are very expensive in mana cost. If you do not play around Resonance Beam, you're not going to have any mana, and you're going to be pretty sad. Ideally, you want to find anything you can attack. Walls, creeps, minions, heroes, for a very brief second because you got a 6 second grace period before the stacks get refreshed back down to 0. So tag anything you can, and when you do, you basically get 36 mana back because it's 6 seconds. You get 3 mana regeneration plus on top of whatever you have. So whenever you can, keep this charged, but don't think too much about it. And also, be careful not to fall in the trap of keeping yourself stationary as Tassadar. You want to be on the move as much as possible, and you want to plant yourself in the safest place possible without being hurt, so long as you can deal your damage. It could be one spot in 1 second, and then when enemy heroes have used their abilities, it might be a different spot. Or maybe the cooldown's refresh, and then you move to a third spot. Whatever it is, you want to be in a nice, safe location so that you can apply your slowing, so that the rest of your team can easily kill whoever it is you're focusing on. That's all I can say from Resonance Beam. Ideally, you don't want to spec into talents that's augmented too much because at the end of the day, it's just a trait, and it is not worthwhile to stay in a fight for 4 seconds when in reality they can end in less than half a second. You want things that can improve his base abilities and all that jazz. Speaking of which, let's talk about his Q. Q. You self-root yourself, and then you send out a beam of powerful energy, dealing massive 280 damage to everything it hits. Straight line. And it has a very long range as well. I think it's like range 12 or 13. But if you see somebody, you can zap them and deal massive amounts of damage, and you slow them for 30% for 2 seconds. Very important. Shock Ray is your bread and butter. It's your most important damaging ability. And because it's so important, and the fact that it's kind of a hard time hitting an enemy, ideally you want to wait for your teammates to apply some sort of crowd control so that you can zap them with your Shock Ray. Otherwise, you might miss, and if you do, that is a massive amount of damage lost, especially in the type of build that I play. I augment it a lot, and that if I miss, I'm not dealing any damage for a long time. Shock Ray can also be used to clear minion waves very efficiently, especially when they're approaching you in a line formation, one after another. You can go through the whole thing pretty easily. And it also can hit all of the minions if it's in the H formation. It's wide enough to do that job. Shock Ray is an excellent poking tool where you can harass any heroes. Be very mindful, very similar to your trait. You don't want to keep yourself standing still when you're trying to escape or you're in a kind of a dangerous position because when you try to Q, you open yourself up to being engaged upon and then you die because Tassadar is very squishy. Yeah, wait for your teammates to apply crowd control, or if you got a good read on that the enemy is forced to move in a certain direction, whether it is by a wall or whether it is because they're walking along a hallway or your teammate is scaring them off, so they're forced to go directly backwards, and that's where you can snipe them. Shock Ray, you want to think very carefully about how you use Shock Ray, and then send it out when you have a good feeling it will hit. Sonic Storm. Unlike Ray, this is a lot easier to land, but it's not as rewarding. You see, you press W, boom, a small little circle on the ground gets blasted by a storm, dealing a little bit of damage every half second for 3 seconds. So it hits enemies 6 times total per cast. However, unlike other types of heroes, this doesn't do full damage right away. Instead, the longer an enemy stands in the storm, they receive an additional 20% damage from a storm, up to 100%. So enemies that very briefly pass through it, they're going to take a minor 38 damage, maybe 46, maybe 54, and that's it. But if they last the full duration, they take 38, 46, 54, etc. And then they receive the double damage 76 and a second tick of 76 damage. Again, it hits them 6 times and takes 5 ticks before it reaches max damage. If an enemy is forced in place, you can already see the massive amount of damage between your Q landing on them because they can't escape and the Sonic Storm ramping up ludicrous amounts of damage. You'll see that Tassadar synergizes very well with heroes that provide lots of crowd control, especially those that can keep them locked down for a while. Because when they do, suffer massive amounts of damage. Think about it. If you can just drop this on minion wave, it basically clears it on its own. It needs a little bit of help, just toss out a Q alongside your Sonic Storm, and boom, you'll kill the whole thing. Tassadar is amazing at killing minion waves, and this is basically your early game objective. Go into a wave, you clear it out, and then you go on to the next. You can deal substantial amounts of damage to the enemy forts, but Tassadar is extremely easy to gank. That will just lead you up to inappropriate deaths, so to say. Yeah, that's all I can say about Sonic Storm. Very useful ability. Force Wall. Force Wall. The most important ability in Tassadar's kit, and it used to be an ultimate for him back when he was in the fort. I loved it since. Force Wall, the targeting is interesting. It creates a rectangle perpendicular to you. So if you're standing one way, then the rectangle is going to be facing towards you, the whole thing. After a half-second delay, it formulates and it appears, and then that's when it starts blocking people. Ideally, you want to use Force Wall after your teammates use crowd control. You can send it out raw, that's okay, but it's especially deadly when you stack it with crowd control. If you stun somebody for half a second, that is a very easy opportunity for you to drop a Force Wall that they're guaranteed not to slip under the crack before that half-second delay and it forms up, and they so happen to squeeze under it right before it goes up. But if they're forced to be rooted or stunned, and you drop the wall, that's essentially an additional 2 seconds of crowd control that you just added on top. Force Wall can deny enemies that are unstoppable, because at the end of the day, they're walking around. They're not using movements. They just cannot be crowd control. But terrain, they can't walk around terrain. So this is a way of keeping people unstoppable in bay. And also, it prevents people from dashing through it. If you have a launch/jump type of ability, it can go over it. But if it's a dash, if you can't go over a wall normally, you can't go through Force Wall either. So Tassadar is especially effective in locking down these types of heroes. How do you use Force Wall? Well, ideally, you want to use allied CC, but you also want to look for opportunities that you can shut people in hallways, at choke points, passageways, any of the like. Because when that rectangle puts up, if the enemy collision box, which is a circle by the way, if it cannot cross through the wall or the Force Wall, they can go through it. So even if there's like a tiny little gap, it doesn't matter. So long as it's there, the Force Wall is good enough to keep them completely locked in. Also, positioning is very important with Tassadar. Not only are you trying to use your trait and your cube, obviously, but Force Wall is also, the rectangle is always perpendicular to you. So if you're in one place, it's a 9-degree angle compared to the wall, and that's not what you want. But if you kind of stay a little bit closer to the wall, or you're over it, ideally, you can cast the Force Wall over it, and boom, now you have a 45-degree angle wall where it's kind of forming a half V shape. And if you do that, it makes it very challenging because an enemy can't walk backwards towards your team. They're not going to want to do that. They would rather sit still for 2 seconds than, go the very long meandering way around. If you place it, perpendicular to your wall, they're just gonna make a left turn and they're gonna go all the way around and then go straight once more. But if you're able to trap them in that V shape, there very few people are willing to go backwards to get around the wall and then go forwards. And especially deadly because it's a rectangle. So not only do they cross, the corner, they have to go down, another straight path and then cross another corner before they can go back straight. So if you understand what I mean, I really wish I was, using PowerPoint presentation because I can show you exactly what I mean. But force wall is very important. Tassadar is all about it because if you can, ideally, you constantly want to be moving around and looking for opportunities to force wall. And only then, when you drop it down, that's when you start planting yourself and becoming artillery damage mode. Because catching somebody with a wall for 2 seconds is more important than you, quickly dealing your damage. Circumstances can change. This is not a hard set rule, but ideally, if you can guarantee the wall, the kill is much more likelier than you trying to deal your damage and then trying to do a wall on somebody that's already trying to escape. All I can say about his basic ability. It's a very interesting combo because if you keep somebody locked down with your wall, it's very easy for you to land your shockwave, and it keeps people locked in place for your Sonic Storm to start ramping up its damage. And then when they try to round the corner, that's when you zap them with the ray because they've committed to their one direction. Archon and Black Hole. Archon transforms you into a massive beast. You immediately get 25% of your health as a bonus shield on top. You fully charge your trait, so you're regenerating mana all the time. And you also transform your trait. First off, you deal double damage already. So now you deal 140 damage to your primary target, and you splash to nearby enemies for 70 damage. Every time, and not only that, but since your auto attack is charged by Resonance Beam, you get to slow them, and any enemy hero you hit splashed will also receive the slow. So ideally, center of mass of people is great for maximum effect, damage, and slowing, and reduce their spell armor by 20% for 2 seconds. Not only does Archon give you reliable damage in the form of the fact that you can actually auto-attack people for good amounts of damage, but it also removes the beam requirement. It's now a single auto-attack per second rather than you doing a beam, which is much more important. It allows Tassadar to actually kite and orb walk compared to other circumstances. So Archon not only transforms you into a rather terrifying tanky beast, you get massive bonus damage and massive spell shredding, which makes your damage go through the roof, and it also amplifies your team. Furthermore, by allowing you to move around, it gives you reliability, something that you can actually protect yourself with. Archon is very effective against teams. Lots of quick moving heroes that ideally would counter Tassadar. Archon kind of flips it around. Now you become the danger, and they can't really kill you because you're huge, you got lots of shielding, and you got lots of damage. Damage they cannot avoid. This is your choice 80% of the time. Archon is an excellent ultimate. The only downside is it's got pretty big cooldown, and it doesn't start until the form has ended. So in reality, it'll take you 102 seconds before your next Archon. Black Hole. After a quick cast, you send out a Black Hole. It travels a very long distance, but it's very slow moving until it accelerates right around midway points. Any enemy hero like within the area will start being dragged towards it, and they hit the center, they take a 1.25 second stun and massive amounts of damage. Black Hole is kind of an underwhelming ultimate. You'd think that this would completely transform how a teamfight would work, but instead, it's a very meager kind of ability. Like, the pool is not too substantial, the damage not too high, the stun is whatever. However, if your team has like any type of AoE ultimate that drags people together, mosh pits, Daria, Gravitons, your Apocalypses, whatever you can combo it with, or your Mace Snowball. A fan favorite of mine is using a Mace Snowball. Black Hole is basically guaranteed. This thing can absolutely shred a team apart if it hits multiple enemies, but it's very unlikely. It's pretty good at peeling for yourself if somebody's trying to dive you. You can drop a Black Hole straight on their face almost immediately, and they get stunned, they take damage, and they get dragged away from you, giving you distance, which is pretty cool and all that. But there's a chance you miss that, and if you do, well, you don't have an ultimate. Whereas Archon, you always have Archon value. The only question is whether or not it's a worthwhile fight to pop it on. But Black Hole has a chance of failure, and hence you need a lot of support from your team before it becomes kind of good. Even with Team CC, it's so slow moving that it might not even do anything. It's very effective whenever you get tight choke point, or for whatever reason you're able to force the enemies, in a certain area. You're able to black hole them. Pretty effective. If you ever need to keep somebody standing still, especially for Psionic Storm purposes, the black hole can move them away, which is annoying, but you can keep them locked down in place with Force Wall. By putting the wall in the trajectory of the black hole, the enemies cannot be pulled through it. So they just kind of, they get dragged, and then the hole goes underneath the wall, and they're kind of just, ragdolling on the wall, which is kind of funny. But that's how you keep them locked down in place, just in case you need. Those are his basic abilities. It's a very important kind of mix. Force Wall is your priority. How you can put it down. You're constantly thinking about when is a good time to pop it down. You use your Q whenever you see an enemy stunned, or you use Wall and they're rounding the corner, and Psionic Storm as soon as you keep them locked down for a place. Talents. Let's start talking about them. Second to on some water. Level 1 options. Pretty interesting across the board. There's 3 different playstyles for Tassadar. Static Charge is a quest. Every time you hit an enemy with your Shockray, you will generate 5 additional bonus damage, up to 200 damage. Also, whenever you hit an enemy hero, you will generate 33% resonance beam charge immediately, which is pretty nice. If you hit an enemy, multiple enemy heroes, that's a full charge on your resonance beam. I really like it because by giving my Q a way to refresh the resonance beam, I give myself mana regeneration, I give myself bonus damage, at the time. But it also keeps talents that need resonance beam charge active for a longer period of time, because now if somebody's too far away and you can't reach anything to refresh your trait, you can toss out your Q and it will be able to refresh it if it hits an enemy. Pretty handy. And not only that, but the bonus damage is really nice. It allows you to one-shot minion waves at a certain point. You get enough charge, and because of Tassadar's spell amplification and his spell shredding, this actually goes further than 200 damage. This is actually like 280 bonus damage when you factor in all the variables. So it's pretty cool. Stack charge is pretty nice. This is my default pick. It makes Tassadar's mid-game super strong. Psionic Fusion. Increase the range of your Psionic Storm by 33%, which is a big deal. And each enemy hero or each enemy hit will generate you 0.5 mana, increase to 5 against heroes. Psionic Fusion has 2 purposes. One, it turns Tassadar into a wave-clearing machine. Ideally, you want to be sticking around, hitting stuff so that you can charge up your trait. But that takes about maybe 3 to 4 seconds of standing still, dealing damage, blah, blah, blah. That's a lot of time for some of the GameCube for these. Psionic Fusion allows you to drop your storm all the way across the map, and you can still shockwave from the same range and clear an entire enemy wave without being anywhere near it, which is pretty cool. And you get refreshed mana back for it. So if you're not using your trait to stack up your mana, Psionic Fusion is one way to regain it back, so you don't run dry whenever you're forced away from the wave. It also synergizes very well in late game scenarios where suddenly your wall is long range, your Q is long range, but your W is kind of short range, and you want to affect an enemy sooner rather than later. Psionic Fusion gives you a way to pass it, from a very safe range so that you are nowhere near the danger, and you can keep your high importance status as an artillery mage intact. Pretty handy. This is your try-hard option. In most quick matches, I highly recommend Static Charge. It's a very effective kind of talent. Great mid-game, great early game. What can I say? It's a pretty good talent. Darren Almond, though, is kind of like the joke tier. And I know I'm going to offend a lot of people because they swear by it. And pretty fun talent, I must say. But it's just plain up not good. First off, your trait charges 50% faster with your objects. Pretty nice. This means in 3 seconds flat, you can fully charge your trait, which is pretty important for something later down the road. I'll talk about it later, but it's not. Is that it? Really? 50% faster? Who cares? But after keeping your trait fully charged for 80 seconds, now your auto attacks bounce to an additional target for 75% damage. And when you keep it active for 160 seconds, this gets upgraded to 2 additional targets. Tassadar has okayish damage. I think he has, 15 damage level 1 times 4, so that's 60. Fully charged, that's 120. When you're able to multiply that by an additional 75% twice, you're actually dealing a pretty decent amount of damage. You're dealing 120 plus 90 plus 90. That's 300 damage total spread across the team. But again, I'm not a big fan of spreading damage. Ideally, carpet bombing the enemy team with damage is not an effective way of killing them. You want focused high damage to execute somebody. That is what's important. And then it's a domino effect. Dealing a little bit of damage to everybody is whatever. And if you fight against a certain type of enemy healer who wants to do AoE healing, it's really a big waste of time. And you're going to be basically doing nothing. Hydaran Amulet does absolutely nothing until you can keep your trait charged for 80 seconds. So that is an effective the first 2 to 3 minutes of the game, you have no level 1 talent until it starts doing something, and then you start getting an effect. But you don't want to be standing still auto-attacking everybody all the time as Tassadar. His auto-attacks are just not that strong. Ideally, you want to be moving around so you can get force wall value, as well as making sure that you don't die and tossing out your strong abilities. Your auto tech is used for the slowing. The damage is only if you're desperate to kill them and you need every ounce of damage. Hydaran Amulet is not really my type of thing. It does synergize with some future talents, however, I still think it's relatively weak, even in best case scenario, where a static charge can completely decimate a team and Silent Fusion can keep you relevant throughout the whole game. Level 4, Induction. Tassadar gains 10% bonus movement speed baseline all the time, pretty nice. And casting your Q increases this bonus to 30% for 3 seconds, very nice. In poke-based games, every time you root yourself with your Q, it's essentially a 1-second self-stun. You'll open yourself up to getting hit by skill shots or enemy engages. Induction gives you a way to correct your movement after you press Q, every single time you do it. Pretty nice. However, I don't think Tassadar benefits too much from the movement speed. Yeah, he moves around really fast. It's very effective when escaping, but when he's when he's moving fast, he does nothing. He literally does nothing. He's not threatening. His damage is completely restricted to his cooldowns and not his speed. So Tassadar can drop his whole combo kit. He presses Q. He just all around him, all around the fight, doing nothing. Or he stands still with his trait, invalidating the need for movement speed. So it is what it is. I find value with induction when you're fighting like 5v5 artillery mage battles. Like, let's say there's 3 mages on the main team, there's 3 mages on your team, you being one of them. This is one way of dodging lots of skill shots and keeping yourself safe. So it's okay in that regard. It doesn't have a lot of purpose in every other regard, because ideally, there's another defensive talent that keeps you safe from any teams that want to dive upon you. Talk about electric defense, though. As a rule of thumb, anything that gives you offensive abilities, damage, out control to something that previously did not have it is a big deal. And your force wall being one of them is no exception. Now, your force wall deals 92 damage a second to nearby enemies and slows them for 35%. That is stronger than your Q slow. This is now your strongest slowing ability. And not only that, but the slow is a very big deal. 35% is nothing to sleep on. You can feel the crippling in your bones, straight up. But either way, slowing enemies with your wall makes it, even if you put down a bad wall, it still harms the enemy team in some regard because it's dealing damage and it's slowing them. And because you're slowing them, it's really challenging for them to move to the side, because if they're hugging the wall trying to get around it as efficiently as possible, they get punished. The very big slope. And that slow is typically strong enough that it keeps them on one side of the wall before it pulls down. So in effect, even if you do a 90-degree angle across the wall with your own wall, it keeps them incapacitated on your side of the wall until it drops. So it makes it more effective. Not only that, you can dismount people with the damage. So if somebody's charging you, drop the wall, you slow them, you deal damage, they dismount, they can't just run around it at mount speed, and it becomes very awkward. So it gives you safety in making sure an enemy stays away from you. Furthermore, 92 damage a second is nothing to sleep on. For a 2-second duration ability, that is almost 200 damage. Really good. So electric fence makes everything work so much more smoothly for your ultimate, for your force wall. I'm sorry, it really is an ultimate, to be honest. But not only that, but the 35% slow also makes it much easier for your storm to keep taking damage on them, and it almost guarantees a shock rate going right down up in their alley. Like, they can't dodge it with that kind of slow. It makes it substantially more lethal. Electric Fence is your standard pick in almost every game. It becomes very important when you go for your level 20 talent that upgrades your force wall. Plasma Shield. So long as your trait is fully charged, you will gain a shield equal to 3% of your maximum health every single second, stacking up to 12% of your health. This is a very nice. I'm a big fan of this. If it weren't for the fact that Electric Fence was probably Tassadar's best talent, I'll be picking up Plasma Shield left and right. It's a very good ability. Whenever you're trying to deal with mosquitoes, your Tracers, your Genjis, your Zertals, they want to dive on the squishy Tassadar. But if you have Plasma Shield, having 12% of your health straight up is kind of annoying to deal with. And when they don't kill you right away, you'll just regenerate 3%, 3%, 3%. It nullifies so much damage. It makes it really easy for you to shrug off minion damage, monster damage, tower damage very easily. Tassadar doesn't really give a damn. And the only way you die is through a concentrated dive, a concentrated target on you. You can very easily shrug off poke damage with Plasma Shield. Any kind of assassin trying to kill you, they have to get through the shield, plus whatever your healer is trying to output. It becomes very annoying. And note that it's so long as your trait is fully charged. If you took up static charge at level 1, now your Q can generate charge. So if you're at full charge and you need to refresh, cast out your Q, you hit somebody at the very tip, boom, that's another 6 seconds of Plasma Shield. Pretty handy. Also, it gives you a very quick way to charge it, because if you hit multiple enemy heroes with it, that's a very fast charge, which is pretty handy. Plasma Shield also finds a little bit of synergy with Kaidaran Amulet, because you're charging up your trait a little bit faster. And so long as you're bouncing on something, you're generating charge off it. So, yeah. Plasma Shield, very big proponent for it. I'm a big fan of it when I feel like I'm going to be threatened and I'm going to need protection. Otherwise, Electric Fence is your offensive prowess. It is a very good ability. Level 7 is a defining tier for Tassadar. There are many ways for him to increase his damage output. Start with Beam Alignment Q. As long as your trait is fully charged, your Q will recharge 100% faster, so half the cooldown. And the slow duration baseline is increased to 4 seconds, irrelevant of your trait charge. So, and also it reduces the mana cost a little bit for your Q, so, it's whatever. Beam alignment is all about making sure that your trait is fully charged so that you can constantly cast out your Qs. With the static charge, with the induction, getting more of that more often is pretty nice. Again, this plays into Tassadar's prowess at fighting poke-based teams. Beam alignment is one way to keep, to make sure that you're still poking them with lots of damage without. Yeah, and honestly, I don't have a lot to say for beam alignment. It's kind of a trash tier talent because it's dependent on your trait. If you walk into a fight, you need to charge up your trait. Sure, you hit a static charge, whatever. You still need another 3 seconds of hitting somebody or charge it up. And until that happens, you have no level 7. The slow duration, although a very nice benefit, it's not worth a level 7, talent tier. You need damage. And if you have your trait charged, awesome. You're having a great time. But if you're not having a good time. And you need to do pitch perfect Q after Q. Make sure your static charge is refreshing your trait so that you can keep on permanently. I think it's okay in Poke Wars. It's kind of meh in all other circumstances. Unless you're fighting super tanky teams, but I prefer the other talent. Psionic Echo. Casting your W causes your Q to now only cost 30 mana and create a new storm when it hits the first enemy hero hit. A free Psionic Storm, and it benefits from all your other Psionic Storm talents. So if you bolster your W, that's a new cast of your Psionic Echo. It is going to benefit from all that as well. So good. So think about this. You press down W, you're dealing your damage. You press down your wall, you stop somebody, you press down your W, they're taking damage in it. Okay, they're trying to get away. That's when you hit them with your Q. And when you hit them with your Q, you apply a new storm on top of that. And because your Q is applying 30% slow, it's also making them stand in that new storm longer than your original storm. Also, here's a secret from me. The bonus damage from your W, that 20% increments per hit, that actually transfers to new storms as well. It's not, tied to the ability itself. It's tied to a debuff you apply to an enemy. It's a very short-lasting debuff though, so if they're out of it, they're out of it. But if you're able to chain one storm after another, they're able to suffer double damage. 6 times double damage. Jesus Christ, that is massive compared to the relatively linear exponential damage exponential damage you're dealing with your W. Your Psionic Echo is just gonna inherit more damage, more slowing. Yeah, what can I say? It's just so good. Hitting somebody at tip range is extremely dangerous with Tassadar because my goodness me. Dropping down 2 abilities at range 13 is diabolical, and it does so much damage. I've killed so many people with the residue storm after I hit them with the Q. It's not even funny. Like I've lost track. So many instances. And now, also keep in mind, storm does not stack. So if there are multiple storms on the same area, it's not going to deal any additional damage. They only take damage from one at a time. But if they exit that area and they move to a new area, the storm that follows them, that's going to inherit all the bonus damage. That's when you really want to use it. So ideally, you use your storm, you wait until it's either expired or they try to escape from it, and that's when you try to use your Q. Make sure that they take follow-up damage from it. Excellence. This is independent of your traits, unlike beam alignment. You don't care about it, and it's you roll up to a fight, you can use it right away on anything, and it deals massive damage. Big fan of this ability. Arc Discharge, also pretty decent. So long as your trait is fully charged, your next attack with your basic attack will immediately drop down a storm. Immediately, whatever it is you're attacking. Unlike Sonic Echo, which was dependent on you hitting a enemy hero, Arc Discharge works on anything. This can work on an Immortal, this can work on a minion wave, this can work on buildings, mercenaries. So it gives you a very good way of applying damage. However, it's dependent on your trait, and if you don't have it fully charged, it has a 20-second cooldown. But if your trait is charged fully, it gets halved that down to 10 seconds, so it recharges twice as fast. It's an okay talent. Also, there's another thing. Your basic auto attack range is increased by 1, which is pretty nice, I must say. Arc Discharge is kind of okay. If you're going down Kaidaran Amulet, this is kind of like how you deal your damage with it. You're splashing on everybody, you're casting free storms all the time. You want to play around the free storm of this, first and foremost. And then after that, when they try to escape, that's when you press down your W, so that you can chain the bonus damage one after another, and you don't waste it, because it's a very powerful effect. And all too often, if you let it go to waste, you're in trouble. Also, it benefits from Archon because you're remember, during Archon, your Resonance Beam is fully charged. If you attack, boom, instant Arc Discharge. That's pretty nice. That's all I have to say. Sonic Echo first, Arc Discharge in PvE games, Beam Alignment in Poke games. As for your level 10 options, it's I've already described much of it earlier on. Generally speaking, Archon is more individualistic. You need less setup from your team. You're able to be more independent. You can do stuff on your own. But a lot of talents do interact with the fact that it is fully charging your Resonance Beam when you activate Archon. That means Plasma Shield is always on when Archon is active. Arc Discharge can now be activated in just a single hit. Right away, you press R, boom, you're ready to go to use Arc Discharge. I actually really do like Archon with Arc Discharge against very fast heroes where, although Sonic Echo is typically your better option, you don't have the space or the speed to hit a fast-moving target with your Shock Ray. You can put down a Sonic Storm and then follow it up with the Arc Discharge, or go into Archon form, use your Arc Discharge, and then when they try to escape, you can use Sonic Storm afterwards. Pretty handy. Archon's pretty good in all regards. It also scales very well into the late game. Black Hole, if you need a little bit of self-peel, or ideally you want to set up with your team. Either you provide the CC, but ideally you want the rest of your team to provide the CC that you can apply Black Hole. Moving on. Level 13, you've got some excellent choices. Feedback is your offensive option. Whenever you're hitting an enemy with your auto attack, your Resonance Beam, whilst an enemy is underneath a Sonic Storm, you will slow them down at 50%, and you shred 25 armor. This is massive. Whereas you had Spell Armor shredding with Archon, now you have a very powerful 50% slow with 25 armor shred. This synergizes extremely hard with anybody that deals physical damage. Your Bruisers and Executioner type ranged assassins, they will really benefit off of feedback. And in fact, Tassadar's damage actually kind of goes pretty high even with this pretty small tickle beam. It does benefit a lot from the damage. That 50% slow is nothing to sleep on. It is absolutely crippling and devastating. When you have space and you're able to attack somebody freely, feedback really increases your damage and lethality. Like, it is nuts. And when you slow them to high heavens, it's very easy for you to land a very easy force wall afterwards. So I'm a very big fan of feedback. Furthermore, if you're in Archon form, if you attack somebody, the Resonance Beam slow of 15% for 2 seconds, now it gets upgraded to a 50% slow, and armor shred, and spell armor shred for 2 seconds per attack, which makes him a complete monstrosity. I'm a big fan of going Archon with feedback after I learned that fact. Typically speaking, if you need more damage, feedback is the way to go. Shadow Walk. Now, Shadow Walk gives you an extra button on your hotbar. Whenever you want to, you press 1, and you immediately become stealth and unrevealable, and it's 40% increased movement speed, 35 armor for 1.5 seconds. You can use this when channeling Black Hole. You can use this when channeling Shock Ray. It will immediately allow you to reposition. So if you feel like you're in danger or you're about to get hit, Shadow Walk yourself out. It's a emergency button where you need to alleviate pressure off of yourself so that you can go further back into your team or go behind the friendly team so that you can reposition and strike back at the enemy team. Aside from that, you can use Shadow Walk as a very brief offensive repositioning tool. You could basically dive underneath stealth, get 40% speed, move up really fast, and see if you can put down a force wall. That's one way of using it, but primarily you use this for defensive purposes. And it has a pretty lengthy 60-second cooldown. It's nothing really, but you can only use it once per fight. And ideally, it's something when you're saving for like a Diablo charge or something like that, where if you get picked on, there really is no hope for you to get out. Shadow Walk is your only way to get out. Oracle, excellent choice as well. This also provides you a new ability on your hotbar. You press the button, and then you reveal a relatively large area, and then as you channel, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So long as Tassadar is channeling it, you will reveal the whole area as well as any enemy heroes that you see. So it's very good at quickly spotting or checking out if somebody's doing a mercenary camp, if you're about to advance into some bushes, like say on Cursed Hollow. If you want to double check if they're doing boss, Oracle gives you presence of mind, where you can double check to see if an enemy team is coming. If they're HOTS as a game is very much tic-tac-toe, where if the enemy team is missing, you can guess they're doing, let's say, option B. But with Oracle, you can guarantee you can check. If they're not doing option B, they're probably doing option C, and it becomes very easy to deduce where the enemy team might be afterwards. So it gives the team more reliability. Of course, I'm completely glazing over the fact that this gives you a free 30 spell armor permanently, as well as a little bit of health regeneration, but we really don't care about that fact. The spell armor component is amazing while stationary. So whenever you're stunned or rooted or you're forced in place, you get spell armor. Whenever you're casting your Q, spell armor. Whenever you're pressing your black hole, spell armor. Whenever you're sitting still using your resonance beam, spell armor. Pretty nice. And remember to stop every so often to give yourself spell armor. It's extremely efficient when you combo it with Archon, because every time you stop for a brief second to send out your attack and then keep moving, you're activating that spell armor. And the 25% max health shields, the plasma shield on top of the spell armor you get from Oracle, means you are basically unkillable. 112% health with 30 spell armor really skyrockets your survivability and makes you obscenely difficult to kill, especially diving. So if you need like passive protection, like there's a lot of spell damage coming your way, and you want something to weather it off of you, Oracle is a very good option. Shadow Walk is good when you need to avoid focus fire and dive attempts, and Feedback is when you don't need any survivability, and you'd be very happy with some offensive power and lethality. Level 16, a few good options here as well. Thermal Lance. Shock Ray will now deal an additional 8% of its maximum health to the first hero it hits. An even stronger nuke. As though there wasn't enough talents that augment the power of your Q, here's yet another one. This is definitely good into high health teams where, shredding a massive percentage of their health is a pretty good idea. And this is where beam alignment actually gets a little bit of value because, hey, if you double the times you press Q, you double the times you benefit from Thermal Lance. Relatively decent. Typically speaking, Tassadar would much prefer the other options in terms of damage output because a team is rarely so tanky that Tassadar has trouble dealing with it. And Thermal Lance is the very rare. It is the solution to this very niche and rare problem. And even then, it's not the best at its job, but it is phenomenal at blowing up a single target one at a time, which is something you should be doing either way. So, relatively decent, and it's good in poke wars as well because it's kind of difficult to take advantage of the other talents when you're at max range, 13 range to be precise. Psychic Shock. Psychic Storm deals damage 25% faster. What this means is the interval between each Psychic Storm damage tick is now shortened. So now, instead of you hitting an enemy 6 times, you hit them actually 8 times. And that's very important because, remember, when you're at the tail end of this, when you've gone through 5 ticks of ramping up damage, and then you start dealing double damage, that's 5, 6, 7, 8 that deals double damage. That is extra damage at the tail end of it, which dramatically increases it. Like, it's a very big damage boost. So in reality, this is actually probably a 34% damage boost. Plus, by ramping up faster, you're dealing damage sooner. You're incrementing sooner. So an enemy has less time to get out of it before they start doing, taking lots of damage from it. Also, it combos with Sonic Echo, and it also dramatically increases your damage against anything that's not a hero. Your minion waves die in 1W, buildings get shredded, anything just perishes underneath it. It's a very reliable, effective, all-around damage component. Whereas this is relatively unreliable because it still depends on you hitting your Q. Psychic Shock is nice and reliable. You can plop this down onto anything and it'll take effect. This is your go-to for most options, especially with Arc Discharge and Psychic Echo. It becomes very easy to take advantage. Executor's Will. Very interesting ability. This is yet another active variable that goes into your hotbar. You activate this, you get full trait beam charge, you get 20% spell power, and all of your basic and heroic ability cooldowns regenerate 25% faster. So long as your trait is fully charged, this effect remains. For really big fights that are just... I actually really like this, by the way, but a lot of people don't. And I'm going to explain to you why. A lot of people like the power of going thermal lens. It's poke wars, you never really touch the enemy fully for you to take advantage of the other, so you might as well front load all the damage to you so you can just very freely and safely attack the enemy team. Psychic Shock, also kind of similar, but it's reliant on Psi Infusion to give you that range to match the rest of it. So in reality, it's more like a mid-range, high-damage upgrade. Executor's Will, though, is something that gives you immense amounts of endurance, damage, cooldown reduction. Very good when it comes to fighting these huge scale team fights where the fighting just never stops. Now, that's not a common scenario in higher ranked games or ELOs, but there are plenty of scenarios where Tassadar is supporting a push, is supporting a boss, supporting an objective, or is fighting over an objective. And you got these really big team fights that kind of just sprawl out of control. Executor's Will gives him so much damage, and by reducing your cooldowns, you press your W's more often, which means, hey, you got Psychic Echoes, you can press your Q, you get even more storms. But most importantly is that it reduces the cooldown force wall pretty significantly. 25% means, hey, this is effectively 4.5 seconds sooner before you get another force wall, which is a pretty big deal. And with the Future Town's Force Barrier, your force wall is no longer an 8-second cooldown, it's now a 6-second cooldown. And considering that it lasts for 2.5 seconds with Electric Fence, adding additional slowing to the mix, you effectively have a 50% uptime with your force walls, which makes him a catch here. Oh my goodness, like, he's a magnet. Like, Tassadar becomes this hook, line, and reel kind of hero where he just sees someone he wants to kill and he can keep them tracked permanently. It's very good in that regard. And also, fully charging your traits is pretty useful for a few other talents. Arc Discharge, if you come across an enemy and you don't want to activate your Archon, you can just press Executor's Will. Now you're fully charged, you hit them with Arc Discharge, it immediately fires off. And now you can chain that with another W, with another Q, so on and so forth. So lots of synergy there. It also activates Plasma Shield. And also, it is pretty good with Archon as well, because so long as Archon is active, you have it, ticking away. It's always providing you that glorious 20% spell power and the cooldown reduction. And when Archon is off cooldown, when you're powered down, you can recharge that big cooldown sooner, so you can shave off about 20 seconds from it. I think Executor's Will is pretty decent, and a lot of people don't think the same way. Psychic Shock is very good. It's better than what it is described here, and in most cases, it is actually better. If fights, you can always count on... You're not always going to use Executor's Will in a macro environment, but you will use it in team fights. Psychic Shock, though, you can use it everywhere, anytime. It's always giving you value, so it's pretty reliable. Executor's Will does have a chance if you lose the trait. There is no Executor's Will, but typically the duration is so long that you will have another one ready to go. I'm a big fan of it, all things considered. Level 20 has a few good options. Some better, some here. Twilight Archon. Attacks in Archon form increases duration by 2 seconds. As long as you have anything to munch your auto attacks on, you can keep Archon on permanently. This is incredible. Twilight Archon is a god tier upgrade. If you're in a team fight and you feel like it's lasting too long and you need more power, get yourself Archon. This lets you carry games by yourself. It turns you into a complete monstrosity when you're attacking the enemy buildings because Archon never ends. And you can hit the keep, and then you can go for the core. Very straightforward upgrade if you feel like Archon has been a super big help this game, and you've got a lot of talents that have something to do with your traits. Keeping it online for a longer period of time is actually pretty nice. Aside from that, though, I tend to not pick up Twilight Archon too much because I rely more so on the utility of Force Barrier. More on that later. Vocal Blitz. Enemy heroes hit by a black hole center have their armor reduced by 20 for 3 seconds and have a storm created at their location. Kinda okay in practice, but a lot of this revolves. It comes down to you landing your black hole stun, and that is a very challenging kind of thing to do. It's hard enough to hit somebody with it, and the reward is not too great. The armor shred is whatever. Tassadar already does this in spades, really. Feedback, Archon spell shred. You don't need the armor shred from your black hole. That's just something a little extra. And not only that, the Sonic Storm being created on top, although kind of nifty, you're pulling the enemy out of the storm as it's dragging them along, which is kind of funny. So it kind of defeats its own purpose. Furthermore, Sonic Storms don't stack, so it's very disappointing. And in that regard, what's the point of Kugel Blitz? It's too reliant on you landing a multi-man black hole stun, and if that were to happen, you've already won the fight. Honestly, the Kugel Blitz upgrade just adds salt to the injury. It does nothing to change any outcome. If you don't hit the enemy team, it's a useless talent. If you do hit the enemy team, they're already dead, so you don't need Kugel Blitz. So it's a lose-lose situation. There's a good reason why this is the lowest win rate, is because it does nothing. Very much a big shame. I am trying to rework this concept though to something a little bit more chaotic, and I don't know if it's a good idea, but I think maybe a black hole should have more gravitas to it. Force Barrier. Increase the duration of Force Wall by half a second. That's already killer good. Hell yeah. The range by 50%. So now you can, if you see somebody, you can put a Force Wall behind them. And lastly, the cooldown is reduced by 10 seconds, down from 18 to 8. This transforms it into a second ultimate ability, and it is, without equal, one of the most powerful upgrades in the entire game. Tassadar now becomes a very lethal monstrosity. If he's anywhere with his team and he spots anybody, he's always in position to put down a wall. And as soon as the enemy team, they've decided, okay, it's time to retreat, they cannot, because Tassadar will not allow them to run away. Force Barrier is what wins games. You have a lost game, it doesn't matter. Like, straight up, if you see the enemy team coming, you can fight. And as soon as they feel the need to get out and away from you because you deal so much damage, that's when you drop the wall. Just like any other circumstance. But the range increase is so unbelievably massive. It doesn't matter how far they get away from you, you always are there to drop a Force Barrier. And the half-second duration increase also means, hey, you get another, 46 damage from an electric vent, so extra synergy there. Amazing synergy with Executor's Will, with electric fence, your overall game plan. You just kill enemies left, right, and center, which allows you to win the game. Secures kills outside of fights, secures kills in fights. Very nice. Kala's Gift is one of my favorite talents conceptually, and unfortunately, it's such a challenging talent to take advantage of. You almost never see it in play. Gain 4% spell power for yourself in each nearby ally hero, up to 20% total spell power. So by yourself, you're always giving yourself 4% because you count as one person. And when you get near another hero, now you have 8%. Now you have 12, 16, 20%. And then this bonus is shared with all contributing allies. So now you give your whole team 20% spell amp. Wow. Being up 5 levels in terms of damage and healing, that is pretty decent. However, Kala's Gift has a unfortunate caveat that it kind of requires your team to clump. And oftentimes your teammates will completely forget this exists because it's such a rare talent, and they will not respect it, and they'll move away from Tassadar to do their own thing. Sometimes this is good for you, to be honest. You want pressure away from you so that you can contribute from a long range, but it also means you get less value from it. Also, uh, forcing your team to stay near you opens you up to being hit by big AoE ultimates. It could be a downside. You could end up luring your teammates to their death because of that. But if you stick with your healer, deal with the secondary damage to it, which is something Tassadar really craves, he's really able to just completely slam into an enemy team. Like, it is amazing. For death balling purposes, Tassadar really contributes a massive amount thanks to Kala's gift. I think it's a little bit underwhelming. It's kind of hard to see the effect, but you really do feel the power up boost. And I'm not really sure how much my teammates feel it, but I sure hope that my hard work is helping a lot. Okay, okay, so that's Tassadar. What kind of talents do you want for Tassadar? Ideally, my favorite build, where I'm kind of a hipster, I like static charge. I typically go electric fence. I sometimes go into plasma shield if it calls. If I'm very vulnerable to enemy assassins, I'm going to be taking some poke damage here and there. Plasma shield is a good option. Otherwise, electric fence for more utility and damage. Next up, you want to go down Psychic Echo, go Archon. Level 13 is complete flex. I will go into all these options equally. I typically default to feedback because defense doesn't win games, offense does. Level 16, it's either Psychic Shock or Executor's Will. It depends on how important the force wall is, and it also depends on how long the fights drag out. If they're very long, Executor's Will. If they're very short, Psychic Shock. And then lastly, 20 is whatever you want. Twilight Archon, if you are finding yourself in these very extended fights where you yourself, you need to do the hard work of dealing all the damage, Twilight Archon, you become the carry. Force Barrier in all other circumstances where you become the supporting lethality force. Basically, you can really enhance your team's ability to catch up on enemy heroes. You have a lot of control over fights. You can use over your abilities from a long range. Pretty good. And calls get if I want to mess around. But if I have a team that, can benefit a lot from spell amp, I take it. So that's your healer. Maybe your tank, some bruisers do a lot of spell damage, like Ragnaros. They really appreciate that. And some other ranged assassins, like Vala, actually benefit a lot from having more spell damage. So that's also another thing to watch out for. Google Blitz, never. And Black Hole is a very rare kind of thing. The other option you might want to do is going Psi Infusion, typically Electric Fence, Static Echo, grab yourself whatever choice. Ultimate, I prefer Archon still. Level 13 is still very similarly long range, whatever comes up. I tend to prefer Oracle. Level 16 Psychic Shock, and then lastly Force Barrier. This gives you maximum range and maximum safety. In high elo games, people will understand that Tassadar is a very big threat and they're going to jump on you whenever they can. So you need to stay very far back, but this limits your damage potential because you're not dropping your storms. Time Fusion fixes this issue because now, hey, they're all the way over there. It doesn't matter. I can drop the wall, I can drop the W, I can drop a Q for max range. Everything that I need to do, whether it is up close and personal or very far away, I'm equally likely to do. I deal as much damage from away as it is near, and they can't harm me back. So that's pretty cool. And those are basically his reliable builds. Some people will go into Kadarin and Arc Discharge and all that. I'm not too big of a fan of that. I don't like the auto attack build because it is so vulnerable to being punished by any type of skill shot in the game. Even then, the beam is super annoying. Like it straight up, it gets me, focus fired by a fort. I'm not really a big fan of it. All that jazz. So, what kind of heroes benefit from Tassadar's presence? Allow me to. You want people that can take advantage of walls. Ariel is a very good choice. Tassadar provides a lot of PvE damage, so he can charge up a lot of energy, and he does catastrophic amounts of hero damage as well. So he's just a big battery, literally a shield battery for Ariel to provide her energy, and she can whip people into the wall for added stun, CP, and safety because you can force somebody away. Ariel can give Tassadar the space he needs to deal with enemies from a long range. Furthermore, both ultimates, Crystal Aegis as well as Resurrect, are good for Tassadar so that he doesn't have a ice block, so having a way to avoid damage is pretty. Diablo is also an excellent choice. He too can benefit from charging people into the wall, whereby they can't really escape, and then Diablo gives them a quick stun in the middle of nowhere, which is pretty cool. Furthermore, the high impact, armor shredding, high damage, front loaded nature of Diablo pairs very well with Tassadar's massive burst damage, where he can basically go to on whatever it is he's trying to jump on. Aside from that, other types of tanks, you want them to have like reliable crowd control. Joanna is a great option. Garrosh especially. Well, you drag somebody, you toss somebody up into the air, and then they get stunned. That's a very easy setup for you down the wall. Now they can't get away, and now they're slowed, and now they take lots of damage. Tassadar adds lethality to that. May is also a very good option with many types of mages. Her flowing field, her stuns, her blinds, her displacements, very handy in giving things space. She's also kind of independent where she doesn't need gear. So you can focus on whatever crowd control she provides and go off of that. Her ultimates are absolutely incredible. Excellent options for Black Hole. If you see the snowball rolling out, you can literally cast the black hole immediately and have it travel towards a little target indicator of where it's going to land. Black hole will reach it in time. Furthermore, you can also do this with ice wall. You just need to, align yourself with the wall parallel behind it, ideally, so that the black hole can travel behind it. But there's a 50-50 chance that working. Other types of Tassadar is not the best damage dealer by himself. Although he does lots, he needs more from his team to kind of contribute to it. So he likes ranged assassins, especially Raymane, Phoenix, Vala, and there's Evan Cassia. Whatever hero benefits from an executioner, where you do more if they're slowed, rooted, stunned, etc. Tassadar provides an automatic slow from his trait, so he can always keep Executioner up and running. Furthermore, the armor shred is absolutely debilitating. It's a very good way of completely annihilating somebody. So somebody else is dealing the reliable amounts of damage. Tassadar can weave in, weave out, deal his burst damage, and get out. And the walls, they can actually secure a kill when Tassadar is not the only one contributing damage to it. And as for healers, you want somebody to basically keep them alive throughout everything. Morales is great. Stem drone is phenomenal. The dropship is also very good because Tassadar has excellent sieging capabilities. Stukov is pretty good in keeping enemies away from you, which is pretty nice. Ariel, as I've already mentioned, will not go further in detail. And Anduin for pulling you out just in case. Not only that, he also derives a lot of power from the spell amp you get from Khaled's Gift. Alrighty, that is everything Tassadar related. I hope you guys enjoy. See you guys next time with whatever I decide to do because I have ADHD and I like to do this stuff. Alright, bye bye.